I'm now going to use the tapered reamer. If you Google for tapered reamer and Peter Follansbee, you'll find his wonderful plans for it. I've put a collar of metal, this is a bit of copper pipe at the end. This is a bit of old saw blade. So if you've got an old saw that you don't like, you can chop a bit off it and incorporate that into your tapered reamer. I turned this up on the pole lathe and the construction should be fairly evident from here. I found this flexi tie really important to keep the blade in the slot. It just needs to have a slight edge raised onto it, so Google scraper edges. Peter Follansbee suggests that this should taper at about 1 in 12. Do your maths carefully, otherwise you'll end up doing it 1 in 24 as I originally did. Remember that it's one side only that's 1 in 24. Anyway, having done that, and remembering which is the underside of your bench, and this plan that I've got marks everything from the underneath, you then just enter your tapered reamer into the hole and proceed to twist. Would you pass me a leg over in the box marked tapered legs? Yep. Now I'm working pretty inefficiently here just because that's where the camera is, but it's probably easier if you can find yourself a low bench and do that. Be careful not to go too deep. I then turn up, whittle a number of legs. I like the length 54 centimetres, and you can see, I hope, a slight taper. I don't know what the best background is, whether it's against my green apron or against this. Anyway, you'll get the sense of a slight taper. I used to try and measure it, but just make up a few in practice, and then you'll find that having reamed your hole with your tapered reamer fairly happily. You don't want it too tight. Pass me that little wee hammer there, please, Stephen. That's it. And you can then that probably needs to be reamed out a little bit more, but I think for the moment I'm happy with that, and I'll see how the horse goes in use. Okay, that's the end of that bit. I suggest the next thing we do is the marking out. I'll show you how I do it in the end.
Hit the line.
Oh, good. I'll put a wee... You can do this with a plane if you like, but I find it quicker to do it with a knife. When you decide how to mark up your plank, can you see the growth rings are growing in that sort of line? This plank, if it's going to warp, will warp so that this edge and that edge are slightly raised. So it's going to end up with a curve, a slight curve like that. I find if you're using your bench ever as a work surface, it's better to have a slight depression in the middle of the plank rather than to have the top of the plank rounded. So the long and the short of it is, when you're marking out your plank, put the pith at the top of the plank. So we're going to mark out, in use this will be the top of the plank, and we're going to mark out here on the underneath. So mark out at the bark side of the plank. Under. That's a very good idea.
Right.
As my colleague points out, right, under. I'll do a scratch mark along there, Stephen. And a good firm scratch mark. It's good. Yep. And now do a score 1.5 inches in from each end. Okay. Yeah. Now, I'm looking at this plank and deciding whether the swing arm should go at this end of the plank or that end of the plank. Sometimes there's a knot in the way, but this plank looks pretty clean and free of knots, so I don't think it much matters. 2 inches in from the end, we're going to drill. That's it.
Vertically then.
Yep, we're going to drill a hole vertically through. So, measure 2 inches in. Oh, about a 2 or 3. You can then, I've just made 2 scratches which are parallel, and push your scratch mark, push it all in the middle. I then reach for do a few test pieces first. This is an 8.5mm bit, which seems to work fairly well for this M10 eye bolt, which is 81mm long. But whatever your ironmonger can supply you is what you'll end up using. You can reach for a hand drill and do it by hand, but guess what? If you've got a pillar drill, it gives you vertical lines every time. This hole here I find works best with a 14mm bit, but we're not yet at the stage of making the tongue. So, guessing which is the halfway point, with my marking gauge I do a scratch line and another scratch line, and the 2 lines are a little bit off, so we then just take the visual average of the 2 and that's where we're going to introduce our drill. Yep. Two. here's a horrible piece of scrap wood. It's a variable taper, and I've chosen it because of its variable taper. You can see how the horse will grip at different points. Now, I can push the wedge forward. There's the wedge. And it grips okay. And note that as I pull there, my wrists clear my knee. So that's fine. But if I was to whittle something a bit thinner, and I'm pulling here, can you see that my wrists, or fingers actually, are hitting my knee? So I reckon this particular shave horse leg, or swing arm, is too short. The throat distance, that is the distance between the tongue of the horse and the hitting arm at the top, that's the throat distance, that's critical and should be something between 3.5 and 4.25 inches distance vertically. That distance should be something like 4.5 to 3 inches. So I don't want to tinker with this distance, but I do want to get my feet closer to the ground. So the next swing arm that I'm going to make is going to be 1 inch longer, and the distance from there to the foot peg is going to be 1 inch extra. With that in mind, this is 27 inches long. The next one is going to be 28 inches long. So we've now got the components good to go, and if ever I should forget what their orientation was, I only need to look at the marks that I've put there to know when they line up perfectly. Assembly of the shave horse, I'll disassemble this one. By taking a lump of wood, any scrap will do, you just go I can then remove the shave horse jaw. Right, now, what's the best thing to do this? There's a pin here and here, which is driven into holes there, a square pin in a round hole. And at the top end, there's a pin which is outside of the swing arm. It's outside so that the swing arm can rotate. Note that the swing arm has got a relief notch in it, about 1/2 inch square, and this one another relief notch a little bit smaller. This one happened to have been turned round originally, but they work far better if they've got 1, 2, 3, 4 square faces. You'll now see the benefit of the square notch in the top. I've got roughly square stock, and I then rotate the notch to engage with the square section of the work. And you can use it dead flat if you wish. this is the pin that's going to go through the front, and that's a 14mm diameter, because the eye bolt, this takes a 14mm pin. Here's the full assembly. There's the eye bolt. Note that it's got a washer at the top, a wing nut at the bottom, and a washer between the wing nut and the plank. And it works much better when it's all got a tight fit. Okay. I was wondering where the through hole was. There's your
Yeah.
pin. Good.
And that goes into.
Yes. This hole was a mistake.
Ah. It's a really short leg people.
I can tell you that. Thanks.
Perfect. And then
your tongue.
with that, I think.
Bob's that mother's brother.
Yeah.
You better test it out, Stephen.
So is that supposed to rotate so we can get the
Yeah.
so we get the grip on the slots?
If you wish.
Yeah. That seems to work.
It works! Hooray!